Welcome to How is God Calling You? A production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It is a show that seeks to stimulate and assist youth and young adults to discover the path that God has chosen for them. Vocations to the priesthood, religious life, marriage, and single life will all be discussed. Your program host is Father James Corda.
Welcome to our show, How is God Calling You? Today we're going to talk with the Sisters of the Humility of Mary. And joining me is Sister Toby, and it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you. It's an honor to be invited. We're happy to do this.
We're talking primarily about vocations, and we all know the difference between a vocation and a career and a job. How does someone in religious life, or that might be considering religious life, go about thinking and discerning a religious vocation?
Well, I think that usually a person starts having thoughts about, wondering about perhaps they would want to be a priest or a sister or a brother. And those thoughts kind of keep coming up, and the person might be attracted to learning more about religious communities. A woman looking at religious life might want to visit some or be curious about what the life is like, those kinds of thoughts. And so those thoughts, I think, are a sign that God has put a seed there, and a person would perhaps get a guide or somebody they know that's already a sister to begin to talk about what it means and to explore what it is.
And I know so often when we talk about our vocations and what helped us decide that, we always go to a priest or a sister that was part of our young life that we remember, and we would say to ourselves, I would like to be like that. And so there's that influence that's there. In your work in vocations, is that still there? Are there still those influences that help young people?
Very much so. Young people today don't necessarily have as much exposure to sisters in particular as they did before, but we've had a series of discernment retreats, and the young people have this hunger, this desire to be more, to have more, to have a deeper relationship with God. And so the influence, there's somebody that was in the parish, somebody that their parents knew, somebody, that influence is very, very important still.
The other thing that I think is interesting is that at least in your vocation work, and probably many religious communities are doing that, is that it's kind of a group effort. It's just not one individual that's in charge of vocations. How has that evolved over time, and why is it important to have the input of others and not just one individual that's influencing?
We work with a team, and I think that's a very important concept, that there's more than one person that a person, interested person can talk to. There's more than one sister available, but there's also such an expanse and a diversity of the interests, both of the young person coming and what sisters are doing today in religious life. And so to have that variety, to have that possibility is very important, I think.
We'll talk a little later on in our show about charisms and the particular draw that certain communities have and why someone might feel attracted to that. One of the things, however, I wanted to talk about is what we would consider like a delayed vocation. In your experience, do you have many older women or second career people looking into religious life, and why is that?
We do have older women that have joined us. We have people that have come in their 40s, 50s, looking at where God might be leading them. And in fact, we have a couple of women who had families before and are now find themselves without their husbands, and children are grown, and so have explored that vocation call, that pull, that God is calling them to something deeper in their own lives, and finding that in religious life.
You know, you mentioned a call, and we believe that vocation is a call from God. How can one be disposed to that call? Because sometimes the call doesn't come early on, but maybe later on. But was the call always there? And how does one discern that call?
I think that one discerns a call by being open to the possibilities, whatever possibilities, as I mentioned before, listening to those inner voices, the thoughts that are occurring. I think people always have that relationship with God, but we're not always tuned into it. And so once we're tuned into it, God might be drawing us toward religious life, just as God draws people toward marriage or toward a very fulfilling single life. But we're often not listening. So I think the key is that inner openness to listen. And so prayer is very, very important, that a person would develop a prayer life and perhaps have a spiritual companion or a guide. Sometimes people will have a spiritual director that they can visit with now and then to help them discern that call, to listen.
One of the things that always struck me in talking with young people about vocations is, sometimes we have a sense that we're only looking for a certain type of person or a certain individual that kind of fills the slot that we're looking for. But a vocation is a lot broader than that. And perhaps that's why there's so many different opportunities for someone to be a part of a particular community. In your experience, how is that in the fallacy that we're looking for certain people?
I think that God is pulling people in certain directions perhaps, and we can facilitate that. And so a large part of our work as a vocation team is helping people know where God's calling them. And it may be with us, it may be with another community, and that's very often. So we encourage young people to look at lots of possibilities, to visit other communities, to get a sense of what are the options before they would narrow down a choice. And in fact, if a person has only looked at us, then we say you really need to broaden that and look so that you find where God's calling you in particular. There's a fit, and the young person knows that when they find it, it's the right fit.
And I think one of the other things is we sometimes get a sense that someone has to be this or that, or has to be very bright or exceedingly academic. But there's opportunities for people who, what I would consider myself, middle of the road kind of average person. In your experience, are there those type of people as well that are attracted to religious life?
Definitely. I think there is a fallacy or myth that people think you have to have all these, levels of education, and we do hope that people have been able to perhaps complete a university degree, but that's not always the case, and we've had people that are very involved in ministry who are leaders in every sense of the word. They might not have pursued an academic career, academic levels for that, but people can. God calls people in all walks of life, I believe, to religious life.
And we know that life in general, but maybe religious life in particular is not all highs. There's also lows and hills and valleys. What would be a typical day in your life where you would experience what normally everyone else would experience?
A typical day would be hard to define in a way. I used to teach in a classroom, and that was very easy to describe that normal kind of day. Today, a typical day might be for me that I get up early. I like to get up early. I have prayer time in the morning. I also exercise, do what I can with that. And then when I go to my ministry at my office, I can go to where we have several sisters that work in one place in our Cleveland office, or I might be coming to the villa for a meeting. I might be meeting someone who is interested in the community. I might be meeting one of our own sisters who needs some help working out something. So the day could be very different. My hope very often is that I can get back to my house where I live with another sister, that we can have supper together. We pray after supper and relax a little bit before we go to bed. But the typical day is kind of, I long for typical days, and very often they're very different. But I like that. I also like that. And I think that for many people today, that the days have more interruptions that are more normal than they used to be, perhaps.
We're kind of coming down to the last few minutes of our first segment. The one aspect of religious life obviously is community and living in community. And how important is it for one who might be pursuing or interested in religious life to remember that it's a community life?
I think it's very important that when we make vows, we're making vows within this group of women who have committed themselves to this community, to one another. The style of community has changed greatly, and some people are often looking for a monastic style of community where everyone's in the same house and has a very strict prayer orario, perhaps. But our experience is that we have community. Where I work, there are 10 sisters that work in that same place. We stop every day at noon and pray together before we have lunch. Then we have lunch together. If we have a meeting coming up, we very often will meet about that ahead of time. And if somebody this morning at work left to go take someone to her chemo treatment, and someone else was out meeting a person who's been connected with the community. And so that community is kind of like a center where we're involved in ministry, but come together again and support one another, pray together.
And that's the high point of community life. Obviously, there are challenges as well. What are one or two of those challenges?
Well, I think because we're all human beings, there are the challenges of personalities, of I can get frustrated because I have a lot on my calendar, I think, and so there's an interruption when perhaps the interruption was the point of my day and I missed that. But the same kinds of frustrations or emotions that anybody experiences are part of our lives, and we learn to deal with those, or we learn to work it out, or we try to work it out. But we're same as every other person, called to be people of reconciliation, peace, learn how to deal with our own frustrations and that.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about community life, religious life, and in particular the Sisters of the Humility of Mary and their charism when we come back.
Okay.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
There is a place where a total stranger will give you their blood. There is a place where someone you never knew will save your child from drowning. A place where people from 7 states away will turn up at your door and give you food and shelter after a flood. There's a place where a person who doesn't look like you, talk like you, or dress like you will stretch out their hand and put it across your shoulders and say, everything is going to be okay. That place is called America, where we look out for each other, and it's up to us to keep it that way. When you help the American Red Cross, you help America.
Welcome back to our show. I'm talking with Sister Toby, who is a Sister of the Humility of Mary. One of the things that we want to focus on now is the charism of your community. And like every religious community, there is a particular charism, and obviously it comes from the founder or foundress. Tell us about your charism, and also personally, what attracted you in light of that to join the community?
Our Sisters of the Humility of Mary was founded in 1854 in France, and the early sisters, when they petitioned to become a community, received the name Sisters of the Holy Humility of Mary. And so humility has been very important for us in our lives. Humility in the sense of being very real, being down to earth. Humility comes from that word humus, like earth. So down to earth kind of people. And when I was in high school, I was so aware of the sisters as easy to talk to, very down to earth people, very real, a nice spirit. And the other part of that charism is helping to bring more abundant life wherever we are. And so that life-giving sense that Jesus invited us to be.
Well, I know growing up, we always called the HMs the Blue Nuns, and that was obviously because of their habit, you know. But I'm glad you mentioned the holy humility of Mary nuns, because I think there's something in those words that are very descriptive about what the order is and what you strive to do. We know one of the areas, obviously, at least in our diocese and around, that you're very involved with was healthcare. And we're very familiar with the humility of Mary in the healthcare system. How is that continued in the lives of people, and something you want to pass on to others as part of their mission that they could be involved with?
Our sisters, as you well know, are very involved in hospitals here in the Youngstown area and other cities. Many of our sisters are still involved in healthcare, a few directly in the hospitals, but also, like Sister Judy is working in healthcare in Haiti. We have Sister Kathy who works in West Virginia in healthcare and even rides in the ambulance and that kind of healthcare in a very rural setting. But our sisters have always wanted to meet the needs where the needs were. And so if it meant going to Haiti or to be available in a little clinic setting or wherever the people have needs. Education the same way. Many of our sisters were in the classrooms. Now we're doing education in lots of other ways where the needs are. One of those areas is in the area of human trafficking, and we're working in Youngstown area as well as in different areas of northeastern Ohio, but educating people about that issue, educating people about the needs of others, about immigration, those kinds of things. So several of our sisters are involved in those kinds of ministries as well. But it's the same, as I said before, it's bringing, meeting the needs where they are. What are the needs today and how can we best meet them?
One of the words that we oftentimes use when we invite others to be part of who we are and what we do is that whole word of mission, that whole sense of mission. How has your community invited others to be part of your mission, and specifically, what is the mission?
Our mission, again, is bringing more abundant life, meeting the needs where people are, the new needs of the time. And we've done that in different ways. We have, in fact, a volunteer program that is a very strong sign for us and for many, that young people might not be drawn to religious life, but are looking for a way that they can serve in mission. And so we've had 10 to 14 people each year in different areas working either at the villa on our farm or in Immokalee, Florida with immigrants, or in Miami with refugees, in Cleveland with the Migration Refugee Services. And that's one way they participate in mission with us. We have associate members who also are participating in helping us with our ministries and our mission. And we have the women that we invite in the summer. We have an immersion program inviting them to be involved in mission and ministry with us at our mother house to get an idea of what's that like. What is it like? So they can come for a week to do that with us. We work also in a volunteer service, but it's participating in the mission and the deeper mission, of course, that's Christ's mission that we participate in.
When you have these experiences where you invite others and other religious communities to do that, are there those that take the next step and that might want to be part of the mission in a more personal, active way?
They do. You can see a progression. People that might come for a weekend retreat out of curiosity or learning to discern their own call, and then people that might come, some of the young women that came for the week-long summer immersion. Then we have 2 young women now living at the villa for a year program, exploring where is God calling them in a deeper way, in that sense of going deeper in spirituality, learning about the community, about mission. Not necessarily that they will be vowed religious, but they're certainly looking for where is Jesus calling them in mission and what's their journey. So trying to make opportunities available where the needs are.
When you go out and you do your vocation work, what are some of the tools that you try to impart to those who might be interested in learning more about religious life? What are some of those discernment tools that they could use to say, this is right for me, or this is where I belong, or maybe I should pursue somewhere else?
Yeah. I think our weekends are kind of a tool in itself that helps teach the discernment method, helps people learn how to discern. Inviting people to have a spiritual guide and inviting them to walk with someone, whether it's a priest, a sister, brother, layperson who's very steeped in spirituality and call. Those are some of the tools, but making it an active thing. Simple things like journaling and writing down the reflections, establishing a prayer practice, whether it's a short time each day or a longer time, any time where they can be listening to what's happening inside, what are those movements of the Spirit within them.
I think one of the words that come to my mind when we try to discern a religious vocation is that whole sense of commitment. You know, there's a particular commitment that you make and that you take. How has that changed in your experience, for the better or not so?
It's definitely changed. I don't know that it's for the better or for the worse. It's changed. It's very different today, and we see it in commitments to marriage, commitments to long-term a job or a company. People are moving around more. But what I do see that's that's very good is this very deep hunger that many young people have for the more meaning in their lives, and many people find that in prayer and spirituality. So I see, and there's a very strong sense of commitment to others. And there's more volunteerism, there's a very strong sense of that. So those are very beautiful signs, and sometimes can lead to religious life. I think there are lots of opportunities for people, so it's very different today and for them to choose.
In your experience as a religious woman, how has religious life kind of changed or evolved over the years, and in your experience now with vocations?
Well, in the past we've had numbers of vocations where there would be people coming in, and there are not so many people coming in. We've had lots of inquiries again, and we follow through with people and visiting, but not as many will continue on that. And so that's a big change in my experience. However, I do see other ways that people are desiring to follow God, and if that's where God is inviting us as vocation ministers to also go toward, something new and different, then that's where we can move. So, yeah.
We're coming down to the last couple minutes of our time together. Usually people that might be discerning a religious vocation, there's questions that they have. What are some of the questions that you might ask them to consider in their process of discerning?
The first question I would ask is, have you ever considered religious life? I think that for some people they're not invited, or they haven't heard that question. And so I would invite them to consider that question. Invite them to consider the question about where's God calling you? Where do you hear the Spirit nudging you? And will you take the risk? Will you take the risk? When a person enters religious life or the seminary, that there's a time of discernment even in that entry. So take the risk. Would you dare to take the risk and try it? Because I think that if you don't know, you will never find out.
Now, let's take that just a step further very quickly. Let's say that they do take that step, but it's not what they wanted. What do you tell them to kind of assuage the feelings or anxiety that they might have?
Even before they come in, we tell them that this is a time of discernment. And so you may discern to continue, you may discern that that's not right for you. Whatever you discern, we do it with you, we walk with you, and we want it to be the right choice for you. That's what we would hope somebody would hear.
In closing, what would be one of the biggest joys that you've experienced in your life as a religious woman that you would like to share with the folks that are with us that exemplifies what religious life is all about, but what kept you and drew you and sustained you?
The biggest joy for me is the ongoing abundance of God pouring out gifts in my life, in community, in ministry, in so many different ways. And I repeat, the beginning of our vow is in response to God and with joy and gratitude. And I've certainly had difficulties in my life, but overall, the joy and gratitude of a very fulfilling life in God and with such abundance that I could never have imagined in my own life.
Well, Sister Toby, we certainly appreciate your presence on our show today, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here with you.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
How is God Calling You is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Corda.
Whether it's passing on medicine, a blanket, or something as simple as a glass of water, that's how compassion works. And that's how Maryknoll works, hand to hand to hand. For nearly 100 years, Maryknoll's been passing on your help to the priests and brothers working in 26 countries around the world. Maryknoll, an American Catholic organization, dedicates 86 cents of every dollar donated to their programs, serving the world's poor and powerless. And that's how it works. Compassion flows from your hand to the hand of someone in need. Hand to hand to hand. That's Maryknoll.
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 That's Maryknoll. That's Maryknoll.